I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. I'm a parent educator, and my mission is to help children by helping parents. The motto of this podcast is raising our children, growing ourselves. Today, teaching empathy to kids. Empathy, what is it, why it matters, and how you can teach it to your kids. I am speaking with someone who actually lives in my town, but we didn't meet in person, at least yet. Lynn Azarki. She's the author of The Empathy Advantage and the executive director of Kids Bridge Tolerance Center outside of Trenton, New Jersey, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering bullying prevention, anti-bias, diversity appreciation, empathy, and empowerment strategies for youth. She's a tireless advocate for improving the lives of at-risk youth in communities across New Jersey. KidsBridge helps more than 2,500 preschool, elementary, and middle school students and educators improve their social-emotional skills each year. Lynn has won many awards, and her articles have been published in both newspapers and academic journals. She's a frequent speaker to parent and teacher groups, corporations, and major educational conferences. In this episode, she talks about how we are hardwired for empathy, shares a little bit about the science and biology of empathy and how it can be measured, and most importantly, how we can cultivate and nurture empathy using books, storytelling, media, and other ways for specific age groups. Empathy may not be a cure-all, but just a little effort can transform a child into a more sensitive, caring human being. The good news is empathy, the ability to walk in someone else's shoes, can be taught, and Lynn is very passionate about this. I have to tell you, before recording, while I was helping my guest to set up her microphone and headphones, something I do with all my guests because I care about the quality of the podcast, I accidentally turned my own microphone off. So for this episode, my audio quality is not the same as you're used to, for which I apologize. Before we get to the episode, a quick announcement. I'll be teaching a brand new class called How to Be a Calm Parent, right after the Why of Challenging Behaviors and the How to of Dealing with Them masterclass that I taught in March and in April. The attendees told me that they would love to learn more self-regulation tools. And I'm positive that you would agree that parental self-regulation is the holy grail of parenting. When we're calm, present, regulated, when we manage our daily stress, when we manage our emotions, we respond instead of react to our children. I have put together the best tools and practices that I use personally, and I have taught to countless parents to help you become more self-regulated, more well-resourced parent. This is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and if I write a parenting book, it will be about this. Tame your anger, ease your anxiety and fear, deal with your frustrations skillfully, avoid burnout and overwhelm. This is a 90-minute interactive hands-on class during which we will be doing exercises, pair activities, journaling and sharing, and I hope you can join me. I'm teaching 2 dates available for this class, Wednesday, June 9, at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and Thursday, June 10th, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The tickets are now on sale, and I hope to see you there. And now, please enjoy my conversation about empathy with Lynn Azarki. Lynn, welcome to Authentic Parenting.
Thank you. So nice to meet you, Anya.
Yes. So, empathy, the empathy advantage. I really love the title of your book.
Well, it's hard to construct a book title, because I have to tell you honestly, I think I had 30 titles before I worked with my editor to pick something. But the point of the empathy advantage, and the second title, the subtitle, Coaching Children to be Kind, Respectful, and Successful, is the concept that empathy can be taught. And empathy is an advantage. So two things, and this has been my journey, that number one, we're all born with different amounts of empathy, right? And we have our children for a very short time, because very quickly, I'm an empty nester. And that number one, empathy, whatever amount of empathy your child has, you have the opportunity to increase it. And number two, and this was an epiphany for me, I'm director of Kidsbridge Tolerance Center in New Jersey. I had an epiphany, I guess, 15 years ago, that empathy really was the foundation for kindness, respect, and all social emotional skills. And by my peers and colleagues, I was told that empathy cannot be taught. And I looked in the research in the peer journals, and there wasn't a lot there. So in the Kidsbridge Tolerance Center, we did activities to engender empathy. And long story short, pre and post surveys being analyzed, we measured an increase in empathy. So it became an empathy and an aha moment. Well, if I could do it, with students in the Kidsbridge Tolerance Center, I could do it as a parent. Teachers can do it, and the whole world can do it, right? So I just felt that as the years went by, I wanted to share what I had learned with teachers and with parents, of course.
Excellent. I think it would be wise to define empathy for those people who may have heard the word, may know what it means vaguely, but how do you define empathy? And I'll ask you some other questions.
So that's, of course, a very good question. So I do devote a chapter to the definition of empathy. It's really been around for 100 years. It's been defined very differently. I mean, Darwin used the word empathy and sympathy. And so for me, because I want to make it kid-friendly and parent-friendly, the way I think it's defined best is, I think in the 1800s, there was something feeling, that you're feeling, like your fellow human beings. But I love walk in someone else's shoes, that you are mentally, emotionally, and intellectually walking in the shoes of someone your age or your parents or your child. And I think ultimately it makes the world a better place. Opposite or different from sympathy, you can feel bad for someone and then your engagement stops there. But the purpose of empathy is to feel for another human being, and then to walk in their shoes, right? And then to take action. So empathic action would be, okay, for example, in middle school, this new young girl comes to school, she's new, she's sitting alone in a lunchroom. You feel empathy for her, and then that should be followed by empathic action, where you actually do something to help that person. And if we start taking action, won't that make the world a better place at any age?
Yes, it would, especially in middle school when there is the mean girls hurting each other's feelings and children not seeing other children's point of view and that they are being self-centered.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can start young. You can start really in preschool, but clearly with bullying and cyberbullying so high in middle school, it's a good time to really, get on the empathy bandwagon. Now, that said, some parents will read my book. They'll have a high schooler, they'll have a preschooler. At any age, I want to emphasize, it's never too late.
Yes, that's what I love about your message, that empathy is teachable And that's number one. Number two, it's never too late. You can teach empathy at any age. Of course, it's desirable to begin when our children are young. So here is a thing I have noticed. And I read in your book about you that you were an empathetic person. I am an empathetic person. I guess we also have there's a different term, right? High sensitive person, highly sensitive person,
Yes.
or empaths. We have done an episode with Judith Arloff, Dr. Judith Arloff, on empaths. I consider myself an empath. And I remember from a very young age, even as a child, right? You see the difference. Some kids are naturally very empathetic, and some children are not. So I would love for you to talk about those differences. Is there a genetic component? What's the science behind empathy? What have you gathered through your research for this book?
Right. So I did dive into the research because if I'm going to tell people empathy can be taught, I have to prove it, right? So I think that unless, and this is a scientist in England who studied psychopaths, right? So that their brains were not capable of empathy. And so if you have a damaged brain or you're born as a psychopath, you don't have empathy or your brain can't process empathy. So yes, there are a very small segment of the population you cannot teach empathy to. And his name is actually Baron Cohen. I think he's a, a psychiatrist and a research psychiatrist. So that he says that everybody's born with a different amount. And then, my conjecture is that because I have taught it to thousands of students in the Kids Bridge Tolerance Center, that you can do it too. So the science of empathy really starts when we're babies. So have you ever heard of the concept mirror neurons?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as animals, and whales have empathy, and dolphins have empathy, and elephants have empathy, and some little cute little mammals have empathy as well. Scientists are measuring this. So it's not just human beings. Mirror neurons are that we reflect emotionally. Our brain actually reflects the emotions we're feeling. For example, where babies are in the nursery in a hospital, if one baby starts crying, other babies start crying. So it's not like they're analytically saying, oh, this child is crying, I feel empathy, that there is something biological in us called mirror neurons that makes us more sensitive to other people. And why is this a great mechanism? And this is in my book too, that empathy is a survivor concept. That let's say we're in cave person days, right? And we're living in a cave. If this small group of humans is more sensitive to each other and they're taking care of their infants and their children, that promotes survival. So ultimately, the eureka was for me is that this is biologically something that promotes survival of the human race when we're more empathetic. We help each other and we bind together to create a group or a village or a community. So E.O. Wilson is a very famous evolutionary biologist, and I have a lot of quotes from him in my book because he really talks about empathy is a foundation, a keystone to survival. So the science tells us that this is something, I think that if we can practice it more and inculcate it, it promotes a more loving community for the future. And I mean, in these very divisive times, adults, let's feel more empathy for each other. Why can't we all get along? And let's walk in each other's shoes. So it has implications for the divisive society we have today. Did I answer your question?
What surprising things have you learned when writing this book, diving into the research, or did you discover anything that shocked you, was surprising or unexpected?
That's such a good question. I think some of the surprising things for me was the battle that I had when I would say empathy can be taught. And I got a lot of pushback, like, no, you're born with the empathy that you have. And this was in the academic community. So that was kind of surprising to me. Like, why haven't other people said this? So actually now research is coming out. So many benefits of empathy for kids growing up. better team playing skills, more empathy to promote self-compassion to oneself. When you're stronger for yourself, you can be stronger for others. Leadership skills, better interviewing skills, better face-to-face skills. So I was kind of surprised as I went along that this was such a, a strong so many benefits for individuals, for kids, for families, and for communities, like what's not to like. The only other surprising thing was a book I read, Professor Paul Bloom from some Yale, maybe in Connecticut, and he wrote a book against empathy. And
I read that book.
Yeah, so
And
I read it too.
I wanted to have him on the podcast to hear his point of view. So go on. Yes.
So I read his book, and I just think he just doesn't get it. With all due respect to him as a professor, like I think he says like people like Jessica in the Whale. I don't know if you remember this. So there was a little girl who fell in a well in Texas, and everybody's feeling sorry for her that she fell in the well. Is she going to get out? And the whole nation, I don't remember the year, Anna, but this is empathy and it's not productive, right? So if a little girl falls in a well, like to me, that's not empathy. To me, that's voyeurism, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's empathy necessarily.
Right. So he calls that empathy. And so like in my book, I invite him to come to the Tolerance Center because we have empathy epiphanies, A child will say like after 4 years in the Tolerance Center would say 4 years, 4 hours in the Tolerance Center. A child will say like, I didn't realize I was a bully. Like when you get a reflection like that, oh my God, that's so exciting. Or a child might say, I didn't realize in middle school, Anna, I didn't realize other people were being bullied and that I could be like kind to myself. I didn't realize I could go to a teacher. So these epiphanies I'm witnessing, which I want to share, which are in my book, of course, lots of them, that when you open the door to empathy, you get so many gifts and benefits. It just leads to so many other positive, social, emotional skills. And to me, because I've been doing KidsBridge for so long, I really think it is job one. Empathy to me is the foundation, the springboard for all other social, emotional skills.
Mm-hmm. So yes, we are wired for empathy. It's a survival thing that we have. I want to emphasize something and just move on. There is sympathy, there is empathy, and there is compassion, right? I am positive you have seen Brené Brown's, that cartoon about
Yes, I just sent it to somebody today. Funny you should mention that. Yeah.
That's a real, I'll have a link for the listener in the show notes.
So well done. So well done.
So well done about the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Right.
So empathy, you said, is the ability from your perspective to walk in someone else's shoes mentally, emotionally. To open this up a little bit, what do you mean by mentally? What do you mean by emotionally? Is it taking someone else's perspective?
Right. So sympathy would be empathy without emotion, right? Oh, okay, Jessica in the well, or something on TV, someone's hurt or wounded, like you say, oh, I feel bad for her. But the difference with empathy is that you are Jessica in the well. You are scared. You are hungry. You are wet. And let's segue into what's going on today with COVID. Oh, those poor people, they're hungry. They don't have a home. More than that, let's drill down with empathy and walk in their shoes. What is it like for a child to hear her parents arguing about what bills to pay? What is it like for a father who has to work 3 jobs and can't see his kids? What is it like to be a nurse or doctor today, to walk into a hospital? What is it like to really feel their anxiety, their pain? Now, you can't do this with a 5-year-old that they're going to be upset about a doctor walking to a house. But, and I think that a nurse or doctor today might have empathy overload, but honestly, I don't think this is something that we have to worry about with our children. I mean, parents should know, and I have a chapter for preschool, for elementary, for middle school, for high school, to coach parents what is developmentally appropriate, right? Like, you can use pictures to teach empathy to high schoolers. You wouldn't show these pictures to an elementary school child, right? So you have to use your judgment along the developmental path.
Yes. Well, sometimes children particularly, I've had this experience. If you try to bring their attention to someone else's experience and ask a child or a person, what do you think it's like for that other person in terms of the emotional aspect? Mm-hmm. Some people are either blocked or they don't want to feel. They don't know how to step into the shoes of the other for whatever reason. I am sure you've encountered such things that people may say, children maybe, they say, I don't know, I don't care, right?
And we've had that, yeah, for sure, in the Tolerance Center and in classrooms. For example, we teach a segment on Native American sports mascots, right? So in this country, we have Braves and Indians and Redskins. Redskins actually means a red scalp, a bloody scalp. So in the center, we would say, look at this caricature of a Native American. And if you were a Native American, how would you feel? Like Chief Wahoo, from the Cleveland Indians, which they thankfully have retired. So, what do you think? And some of the kids will go like, I don't care, that's okay. Now, some will use their empathy and such, right? So you never tell a child how to feel. They have to process the information. So when we introduce concepts about race or bias or stereotypes in the center, and parents can do this at home, you're not telling your children what to think, but you want them, for example, a sports mascot, to walk in the shoes of a Native American. Native Americans who are here today, who are doctors and lawyers and accountants and so on and so forth. So 2 things. For a child that is not as easy to introduce empathy to, oh my goodness, so many things you can do. Number 1, start early. Don't think, oh, I will start teaching empathy to my middle schooler. If you have preschoolers, start now. That's number 1. Number 2, if you have an empathetic experience to share and you feel like your child is incapable or not ready yet developmentally to walk in someone else's shoes, use literature, use puppets, like, oh my goodness. So here's how literature works, right? So we read our kids a story, I don't know, let's say 30 minutes, and good night. And they, you've spent this wonderful, warm, intimate time together. So what I'm suggesting to your listeners is read the book for 25 minutes, stop, time to process with empathy for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. How was Judy feeling in that book? What did Taquan do? What would you have done? Let's talk to our children. Let's listen to our children. Let's ask very simple questions. You're asking empathy questions and you're prompting a conversation. So empathy is a muscle to be exercised, right? So don't give up if you feel your child is not walking in someone else's shoes. Literature, puppet shows, conversations, family meetings. There's so many things that I have in my book that will coach you and lead you to where you want to go.
Yes, I am curious about measuring empathy. You said that, and I would love to know about how you guys measured empathy. What was it before the children were introduced to the concept of empathy, or before any work was done to develop empathy, and how long was that period, and what kind of measurements have you seen, the before and after, and what age group was that?
Right. So there are in my book some links to quizzes and surveys that parents might want to do, some of this measurement themselves, right? It's not rocket science. There's some questions where like a parent could do a pre-survey, 4 or 5 questions. Teachers can do this. And then you read the book and then they answer the same questions again. And you look to see if there's a difference, right? If there's I didn't feel sorry for Johnny, but now I do feel sorry for Johnny. And in the beginning of the story, they don't know what Lewis should have done or Kayla should have done, but at the end of the story, they know. So parents can't do what we did in the Tolerance Center, but I want them to know we used rigorous science. And this is how it works. Before the kids come into the center, before we go into the classrooms, they take a pre-survey. We ask questions asking about their sense of empathy, empowerment, anxiety, and stereotype awareness, right? So then they go through the Kids Bridge experience in the classrooms or in the center. The last thing they do is they take that same survey again. The data set gets entered into a online statistical package. It gets analyzed. And at the end, we find out which activities were working, which weren't, which ones have to be improved. And ultimately, in many, not every, but in many, many circumstances, there was an increase in empathy, an increase in empowerment, an increase in awareness of stereotypes. Because kids are so stressed, we also leaned into mindfulness, right? Because kids are stressed and anxious before COVID. Mm-hmm. So we can imagine that's worse now. So yeah, you can measure this. But I do have, I think on my website and then in the book, links to surveys that parents, if they're interested in trying to measure, because, you measure and then there's a conversation in that as well.
I see. And how long was the program or the curriculum that the group of children went through before and after?
Yeah, typically a program is a semester, a school semester.
Okay. And are they coming like once a week? What it's like this program?
Well, it depends on the resources of the school. So some schools can only afford 3 sessions, some 5 sessions, some more. It depends on the resources of the school. I mean, I wish we're in New Jersey, we could just, give all these sessions out for free, but we're a small non-for-profit. And so my magic wand doesn't work that well. I'm hoping now in COVID and post-COVID that people will value empathy more and that parents could talk to the schools and that there be more funding to teach empathy to children. So it's not where we would like it to be. And Kidsbridge wants to do more. And here's the other thing, schools with limited resources, even more limited with COVID today, that I'm hoping that parents will take some responsibility and start doing this at home.
Okay. Can you speak about empathy and gender?
Well, I can. It depends on what age group you want me to start with, because gender is different depending on the developmental axis. So I would say that I have found that girls and women have a little bit more empathy than the males. And so maybe it's because genetically, biologically, women, through time have been the primary caretakers of children. And certainly that's not true today. But gender is something we really need to pay attention to going forward. So let's jump to middle schoolers. We find that our girls have diminished self-compassion for themselves, and our society puts pressure on them for the way that they look and that they're not good in math and science, right? So I think empathy is this very clever tool, and I have a chapter on self-compassion that even earlier than middle school, before this takes hold of your children, that we work with children to have self-compassion so that, for example, girls in middle school can feel better about themselves, can be less focused on the way they look. They can be an astronaut, they can be a scientist. That empathy can be used to make children feel better about themselves and to aspire higher. I mean, all these benefits, which I mentioned before. So gender really, in this society, culturally, we just, we don't treat our children, I think, as well as we should in terms of opportunity, and possibility. So there are differences. The other thing I would lean to with empathy is this whole man up culture. Like I had I did a lecture and this man came up to me and he said, I'm glad I was bullied. It made me the man I am today. Well, so that seemed to work for him. But, today, without empathy and with children being bullied and cyberbullied, children are taking their own lives. So,
I was speaking to a neighbor who has a 2-year-old boy.
How old?
2-year-old boy.
Yes.
She has a 4-year-old girl and a 2-year-old boy.
Yes.
The girl is a spirited child.
Okay.
The boy is the sweetest little boy, very easy temperament. You can tell from an early age who is who, right?
Yes, they're born with what they're born with. Yes.
And so I was speaking with her and she's like, I'm concerned for my son. I said, why? He's going to get bullied. The other kids are going to pick on him because he's so easygoing and sweet and nice. I said, are you kidding me? We need more men, more children.
Amen. Absolutely.
Like she's thinking of quote unquote toughening him up. And she's already his life. It's doomed. This poor kid is, and I'm like, wow, it's so wired, this kind of stuff in us that, we want to change our children. We want to change our boys. It made me so sad.
Yeah, this makes me sad too, but there's such an opportunity and silver lining here. So let me just tell you, you're empathic and so am I. So I was told growing up in my life, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. I'm a very empathetic person. Well, if someone tells me I'm too sensitive, that makes me feel awful. So let's do an intervention for this 2-year-old boy and this 4-year-old girl with empathy. The 2-year-old boy, the mother is already like, something's wrong with you, right? So let's give her this book and she's going to teach empathy and self-compassion that the boy grows up thinking, I'm okay the way I am. Maybe he has more empathy than other boys, but it doesn't open him to bullying if he can advocate for himself. So let's say he gets, and teasing and bullying starts at 3. So she can start preparing him that at 3, if somebody's saying mean to him, he can go to the teacher for help, right? Maybe this little boy will grow up to do ballet. Well, boys who do ballet get teased mercilessly. So let's prepare this boy to be able to play with dolls, do ballet, and be the person that he wants to be so that he's not in therapy when he grows up. The 4-year-old highly spirited girl, let's say she is bullying or bossing her brother around. What a great time to sit her down and have a calm conversation with her. And then what does it feel like when you take your brother's toy away? What does it feel like your brother is not invited to the thing, the activity you want to do? So this at a very, teaching empathy to high school, you can do it, but it's so much easier when the kids are younger and then it becomes like riding a bicycle. So does that help you with the 2-year-old and the 4-year-old?
Yes.
She needs my book.
I'll give it to her.
Okay.
So of course it's easier to start young, to tilt our children's attention to that direction so that they constantly can see the world through other people's perspectives, put themselves in the other person's shoes. And I've told numerous stories on this podcast about my daughter and how with, social media and, FaceTime communication, text messages, there is meanness, there is bullying, there's all sorts of things going on. And, there was an occasion where there was a group message going on.
Oh my.
They excluded someone that someone heard and someone had to send a very harsh message to that child who already had been having anxiety and mental health issues and things like that. And, I sat down my daughter, I said, listen, what is it like to be that person who already is
Exactly.
anxious? If you were to receive this text message, how would you feel? And so I had a long conversations about that. I didn't tell her, no, this is not right, this is not nice, don't do that, do this, do that. But I wanted really for her to see, ultimately she had to choose what to do, but I wanted her to see how it feels on a receiving end.
Perfect. That you did the perfect thing with empathy. We wag, I call it finger wagging. We wag our kids, and I think they know the right thing to do, but it's like add empathy to it. That feeling of exclusion, or coming to school the next day and everybody, you've been called gay. You're not gay and they're all calling you gay. And so, I'm older than you, Anna, but when I left school, bullying stopped at 3:00, right? So now it's 24/7. What burden and hardship these kids have. But yeah, empathy, that they really understand the experience, and empowerment that they actually can do something about it,
Yeah, just the other day, they had a group chat again going on, and somebody had recorded the group chat, my daughter's group chat.
Yeah.
They were speaking of someone behind someone's back who was not part of the conversation, but somebody recorded that and sent it to the person. And I was curious how this would be handled by this group of kids. And there were apologies. They were trying to resolve this conflict. It was past 10:30 p.m.
Yeah.
And it was good to see, how they resolved this. It didn't go to the school, it didn't.
Oh, wow. Very nice.
Among themselves, they understood, I guess, that, it's not all right to record. First of all, they were saying it's illegal. You can't record, you can't disseminate. And everybody heard themselves say those comments. And that made a difference too, because I guess when in a passing you say nasty things about someone, it somehow is forgotten because you didn't hear you say those things. But when the recording gets to you and you hear multiple times your own voice, the way you said it, and they were comparing, but like my daughter would say, my comment wasn't as bad as those other people's. And it was a very productive way of handling this, even though it was not a good event.
Yeah. I mean, there's no denying that social media and this increase in media time is so challenging to kids. I think by late middle school, high school, kids are on media more than they're sleeping. So my advice for parents would be in charge of your house, which I saw growing up. Some parents were not in charge of their house in terms of media. So the more media time they have, the less quality interpersonal skills they're going to have. And parents, you are the boss, and caretakers and teachers, you are the boss of your house. If you wanted 2 or 3 hours a day of media, all the different medias, then that's the way your house does it. And when your kids say to you, like my kids said to me, well, in, Jordan's house, they do this. Well, that's not where you live and this is not your house. So it's sort of, as the media time goes up, you are compromising your child's face-to-face time, interpersonal skills. And so if we as a society and a community limit this time, which at a certain point really is not helping the child. Now, the peer pressure to be on social media, like, we get it, right? And yes, they get some social media time, but you can, and I have in my book, a media assessment log that for each family member, how much media are they watching? What are they watching? What is that media like? Is it violent? Is it, not realistic? A lot of kids in middle school still have a trouble distinguishing between reality and fantasy. I mean, look at these reality shows where, what are the kids learning? Stab each other in the back, be nasty, be competitive. These mean girl shows on TV. I mean, we didn't watch this growing up. So you need to be the boss in your house of media. And at the same time, parents, don't be on your phones all day long. I mean, you're role modeling what you're doing, right? Face-to-face time every day with every child. And then I don't know if we've talked about family meetings. maybe 20 minutes a week, just check in with each other. There are a lot of guidelines in my book for family meetings. The 3-year-old should be at the family meeting, participate. We need to take care of each other in the family unit. And we need, especially in COVID times, we need to do that better.
Yes. I think I am increasing face-to-face instead of limiting the social media, which I think parents have to put, rules and regulations.
Yes.
And each household does their own thing. What I want the message to be is not to limit this, but increase the other that is being, especially in the COVID times, it's so hard to maintain. Because if I limit my daughter's screen time now, because she's FaceTiming her friends,
right,
she doesn't go to school, it would be a miserable experience for her. I think we need to use our own best judgment. And I always look at at the positive side. Instead of cutting this down, instead of doing this, the negative, let's increase the other, because they're not mutually exclusive, right? I do want to limit, but I want to increase the face-to-face and exposure and all of
so
that.
I would, in times of COVID, face-to-face time, you have to include, your daughter talking to a friend. That, to me, has to qualify as face-to-face time right now, right?
Yes.
But the media that compromises your children's social emotional skills, the TV shows, the internet, oh my God, the gaming, where women are, take a look at what your kids are playing, like women are just objects, or, running around with a gun and you're shooting all these people. Look at how minorities are represented, Black and brown people on your media. Make sure that it's, fair and balanced, and we need to get rid of these stereotypes we have in the media. Look what we're teaching our children, right?
Yes.
So there's so many things that parents can do.
And yes, there's so many demands placed upon parents these days, right? On top of everything, now we have to teach empathy. Lynn, what is this?
Okay. Okay. So the first thing, look, teachers, right, and parents, so stressed today because of COVID. I get it. And the book is in bite-sized chapters that you could do little things. So what I have to say is, parents, one more thing, teachers, one more thing. I get it. I am asking you to take 20 minutes each week, not each day, each week, to increase your face-to-face time, have a family meeting, read to your kids with questions. A new thought I had, you could have like a check-in bench, like a place in your house where kids can go, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling angry. Just make sure that everybody has a place to express their feelings, and that you can take a time out from your phone or your work so children feel valued and heard, and, for spouses and such. So pick something you like that's easy and doable. Maybe next week, Anna, you could do 20 minutes. Maybe the week after, you could do 25 minutes. You can't drop everything, right? But especially with the increased stress and anxiety, empathy can be your friend and guide. And here's what I love. I think it is strategic. We can't be perfect. We can't do everything right. But empathy to me is a strategic way to, with the little time you have, really do it right? What is more important than, to me, academics and testing and sports are important, but that you raise your child, that the child feels good about themselves, that they care about other people, they care about their family, they care about their humanity. And ultimately, with more empathy, I think we evolve to be, in a much better place as a society and a culture.
What would you say to a parent whose child is hitting them? A child, let's say 6-7 years old, in anger, this child is hitting the parent, saying, I hate you, and all of that. I see this, this type of behavior has increased. A lot of parents come to me And how can this parent teach empathy to this kid, empathy towards the parent, particularly in that instance? Or I don't know, is this a teachable moment for empathy?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a few things you can do. So I do this also in Kidsbridge in the Tolerance Center. When we talk about bullying, I said, when I was your age, I was bullied or I was called a name when I was your age. So again, without anger, and if you have to wait till that moment where you're both not angry, to sit down face to face, put the phones away. And something you can use is active listening. And there's different kind of, methods and ways to approach active listening, that your angry child is looking for attention and wants to be heard. And look, there are some children that might need therapy and more serious interventions. But again, to use this empathy thing, when you are kicking and screaming, when you take that toy away from your sister, when you make me feel, so that your child can, walk in your shoes. Like, I love you, but when my children were angry at times, right? When you are angry like this, you make me feel afraid, or you make me want to withdraw, or just to really share your own feelings. I mean, kids are amazed when adults share their feelings, because they think that nobody feels like them, like they may not perceive their parents as being angry. So I would think, an intervention kind of thing, where more active listening, more face-to-face time. I know one method schools use with bullies who can be mean and angry is they have them mentor younger children. So they take this like negative energy and how bright bullies can be, and they channel it into a more positive, productive kind of energy and focus. So I'm not a therapist, but I think, again, when you really understand the fabric and the usefulness of empathy, it's just a whole new strategic tool to manage your children, and children are not perfect. So I just think it's a great strategy.
You also talk about service learning and community service. I would love if you could say a few things about that.
Okay, that's a great question. And this is something that I learned. So, we have our kids do community service, and it's wonderful, and they should continue doing community service. But you can add a new layer to it, and that from community service to service learning. So service learning in schools is that they might incorporate it into the math curriculum or the English curriculum, and make it more functional and more practical. My take on community services, service learning, is to add empathy. And I haven't read this anywhere. So what do you do? So I'll give you an example. We had kids make sandwiches for a soup kitchen in Trenton, New Jersey. And we measured the empathy before they did the project, and we measured the empathy. Of course, they made sandwiches for people, who didn't have as much food, who were food challenged. And of course, the empathy would go up, but it didn't. So, oh my goodness, what happened, right? So what we failed to include was empathy. And this became very obvious, that we didn't discuss with them what it's like to be poor, what it's like to move around. And there are many people in this country who can't pay rent, and then they move to a new location, and the kids have to start a new school. What it's like to have your best meals in school and not be able, to have an empty refrigerator. So when you use that walk in other people's shoes, and if I had done this project right, I think we would have measured an empathy increase. It's not enough to do something for a homeless person, a person who's hungry, a Vietnam vet who has mental challenges. You need to talk to your children about the challenges that these persons are facing. And certainly with COVID, times are exacerbated and more people are suffering today. Don't be afraid to share that stress and anxiety with your children, not to overwhelm them, but they can walk in the shoes of a family, that has to move because they can't afford the rent.
Yes, I love that, because sometimes people think by just doing the act of some act, some service, some volunteer act is going to magically change things. I love this so much, that having that conversation again, bringing the perspective shift to the person, asking them how they would feel if they were on the other side. And I think what I hear from your overall message is just for us to have the empathy as a concept, as an idea, in the forefront of our mind, in the forefront of our parenting, instead of stressing out that, oh, I have to teach this, I have to do this, I'm a busy parent now, oh my gosh, now I have to do empathy. But just to have that in the foreground of our parenting, and tilt our children's attention and efforts as often as possible towards the other, so that they can be open and try to put themselves in the other person's shoes, and see how it feels, what it looks like, what it feels like. It's not like we have to do extra. That would be nice if we could do extra work, but I think there are so many opportunities, as I have given you a couple of examples from my parenting.
Right.
I don't have to do extra work, but just to pause and have that in the forefront of my mind. And that's why I love the title of your book, Empathy Advantage, to know that there are advantages to this for the person, for the family, for the community, and for our world as a global community.
Yeah, I love what you said, because it doesn't have to be an extra burden. Let's say you go on a nature walk with your family for an hour once a week. Have a conversation prepared where you talk about maybe the homeless or doctors and nurses with COVID, or you know what I mean? You're in the car, you see a homeless person, be prepared with a conversation. Ask your kids, what they think about that person. Like, who is that person? Did he have a job? Who is his family? Why is he walking down the street with no shoes? Or even television. I mean, we get to see the hurricanes and the fires and the disasters. What is it like to lose a vineyard, your livelihood, or to lose your home? I just saw a woman yesterday from Nicaragua. Her house was near the ocean. Her house is gone. And she has children and it's horrible. But okay, so we're empathetic, but then, like, what can we do? You can find an agency, not for profit, in Nicaragua, and send your check, and your child can donate $1. Like, engage them,
Yes.
involve them. That was another quote, I think, from, now I'm forgetting who, but it's not enough to just talk and lecture to your children. You want to engage them in this process of empathy. And one more point on empathy, it's a slow process. So the silver lining to COVID is we've really all slowed down. Take this opportunity to slow down. It's okay, and really listen and have real, actual conversations with your kids and your family.
Before I let you go, is there anything you would have preferred that I asked you, or is there anything from the book or from your message that you want to leave us with something?
Well, I want to emphasize, I mean, obviously you and I really believe in this quality. It makes kids kinder, more respectful. It makes them leaders. In the research I've seen in terms of being in an office or a corporation, it also makes kids successful. So employers are looking for human beings, right? They're looking to satisfy the skills, but I think the most successful corporations are wonderful places to work, where they are, empathy is an advantage, right? Empathy is an advantage in managing other people, because your employees will think you care about them and work harder, people wanting compliments and wanting to think they're doing a good job. So not only a better society, but more successful children. And surely we can do a better job at this. So not a lot of extra work. It's all in the book. Developmentally, we've talked about gender, we talked about media, we talked about family meetings. I guess if I want to close, I want to close with empathy for the earth, which we have not talked about. And there's such wonderful and inspiring kids like that young lady, Greta from Scandinavia. Let's encourage our kids to have more empathy for the earth. They can donate $1 or $5, or they can pick up plastic litter along the beach, or they can, have start. There's just so many different things we can do. We just need to do a better job of enjoying and taking care of our earth, our air, our water, and environment. So the last thing, empathy for the earth. At any age, encourage your children to get involved.
Well, thank you, Lynn. This was a real pleasure speaking with you. I can't wait to meet you in person one day.
I know.
I hope we can meet. We live very close to one another.
We are close. In closing, I do want to mention I have a website, empathyadvantagebook.com. There are resources on my website. And of course, I wouldn't mind if people would, they can order online, just Google it, The Empathy Advantage. It will come up, Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your independent bookseller, and take this journey with me. I've tried to share all that I've learned. And I wish I had this book 20 years ago when I was raising my kids, but I want to share what I've learned with everybody.
Well, thank you. It's a very successful book. I really love your message. I truly enjoyed connecting with you, and I hope we can meet in person. You are the only person I think I've interviewed over past 5 years that is in my zip code.
Yeah,
So that's an advantage.
Okay. Well, it was so nice of you to care about this topic. And yes, wonderful questions. Yes, and I hope our paths will cross again.
Thank you so much.
Be well and be safe, everybody.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it. What's your biggest takeaway? How do you teach empathy to your children? Do you have a story? Get in touch. Send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. Call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And for you, my international listener, I have a tool on the contact page of my website. It's called SpeakPipe. Go to authenticparenting.com/contact and leave me a message. Sign up for my masterclass, How to Be a Calm Parent. If you are struggling with questions like, how do I stop yelling at my kids? How do I control my anger? Why do my kids' behaviors trigger me so much? Why do I feel overwhelmed and stressed out all the time? Then this is the class for you. First of all, you're not alone. Second, you need new tools in your toolbox. This is truly a transformative class. You will learn to befriend your emotions and transform your parenting. It's not about quick fixes or tips. This is deeper than that. This is How to Be a Calm Parent is a hands-on class during which we will be doing exercises, pair activities, journaling, and sharing. You will learn to track your triggers, stay present with what rises, with your immediate sensory experience, ride the waves of emotions, and feel release. Because when you gain self-regulation, then you can respond to your children more lovingly, more kindly. Self-regulation is one of the most important skills that any parent can cultivate. And yes, it's a skill. Yelling doesn't have to be part of your parenting repertoire. You can be a calm and well-resourced parent. I know you can. So join me on June 9th, Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, or on June 10th 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The tickets are now on sale, and you can get yours at authenticparenting.com/calm parent. Again, authenticparenting.com, calm parent. I really hope you can join me for this class. You will not regret. Until next week, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. I am Anna Seawold. Thank you so much for listening.